Hey, this is Rachel over at Moonlight Library. I'm here today to talk about my top 10 books of 2022. Also, I might have a couple honorable mentions. I read 72 books this year, 71, somewhere around there. So, not the most books to choose from, but still a very good bunch. I don't know, I read some that I was like, this will be a favorite of all time, but a lot of them were good, but not I'm gonna shoot to the moon and it's the best book I've ever read. I don't even know what that saying I said was. Here we go. We're gonna start out with the books I physically own, and then we are going to move forward into the books that I do not actually physically own. And the first one I'm going to talk about today, and you know what? These aren't in an order because it was hard enough choosing 10 books, let alone ordering the 10 books. So, not happening. The first one is The House Across the Lake by Riley Sager. I have really enjoyed Riley Sager throughout my tenure of reading his books. I've read probably 3 of his other books. And this one, I think, just as usual, I had a really good time reading it. It surprised me in a way. It follows an unlikable main character, I will say. She is a, alcoholic celebrity who is staying at her family's, lake house so that she can kind of sober up, but she's not really doing that. And it's a year after her husband's death, and move some people across the lake, and there are only a couple of people who live on this lake, and it is really good. I thought it was surprising. I thought it was interesting, unexpected. The Riley Sager does things in this one I think that he hasn't really done in the other ones I've read, at least, of his books. So I had a fun time reading it, and I am excited to read more. I have most of his other books, and I need to just read his whole catalog because I have enjoyed him time and again. Next book that I gave 5 stars to, and it was my first of his, was Blake Crouch's Dark Matter. I really enjoyed this one. It is science fiction. It follows this man who wakes up and everything's a little off in wherever he is, and he has to figure out what's going on, and it is it's wild. It is a wild book, and I had so much fun throughout it. It's it'd been a while since I'd read a book that just made me I was reeling. I was oh my god, I can't stop reading this. I'm kind of just feasting on the words and the story, and it was such an adventure that I couldn't put it down. And I'm excited to read his other books, which I own one. The new one? Not Recursion. That's the second one. I don't know. Whichever one the new one is. I own that. Upgrade. I own that one too. So I'm excited to move forward with Crouch. More sci-fi. This is Cixin Liu's The Three Body Problem. I know it's a series, and I do need to move forward in the series, but I really enjoyed this one. I thought it was interesting. I thought it was such a broad world, and just, I don't know, maybe sci-fi and fantasy are my thing this year. I only read a little bit of fantasy, but I'm feeling I'm in a fantasy era of my life and sci-fi, and I'm just loving this escapism sort of thing happening through books by reading sci-fi and fantasy. So this one follows kind of a couple different timelines. It's in China. Part of it takes place in almost a video game world, and it's very reminiscent in a way of Ready Player One. If you enjoy a video game world sort of thing, and it's aliens, and it is just a lot of different ideas on kind of philosophical discussions happening in this about humanity and the worth of each person and stuff like that, and what would you do if there were aliens, you know? Next up is House in the Cerulean Sea by TJ Klune. I kept meaning to read this one ever since it came out. People were talking about it, and I finally got around to it, and I was like, Rachel, why did you not read this sooner? It is the cutest, sweetest, most magical, wonderful thing. I loved all the characters. It's about this guy who, it's this fantasy realm sort of thing that's kind of like normal. I don't know how to describe that to you, but it's almost like a mixture between like Miss Peregrine's Home and I had another one, but it went out the window. It's a mixture between something. But this guy, he works a very normal blah job, and he gets put on an assignment where he has to go to this house that ends up having multiple, like, magical youth there that are being supervised and such. And he just, like, the bonds he forms and like the life that he thought he was supposed to be living as opposed to the life that he began creating is just so beautiful. Love. Next up is Annie Hartnett's Unlikely Animals. I had read about this on a Book Riot thing where this girl said that she had already read it like 3 or 4 times, and I was like, that's wild, I need to read this book. So I made my book club read it, and it is so good. It follows, it's like kind of this magical realism. It takes place in, I believe, Vermont, and this girl who is a natural born healer who's kind of lost her touch is going back to her family in Vermont. She's in California. She's going back to Vermont, and her dad is like dying of some sort of a brain thing and like tumors or something like that. And they like, he's like talking to animals, and it's partially like it's narrated by the ghosts in the cemetery of the town that can see everything going on. And it is this weird little magical, like, strange, like, down to earth. There's this part where oh my god, I can't even tell you, like, just like all the characters have so much meaning. Everything that happens is just the wildest, strangest thing, and it is beautiful in every way. So I would definitely recommend it. It's a great one. Kiss the spine of every book. Let me pull out my phone for the last 5. The next one is Jennifer Egan's A Visit from the Goon Squad. I do own this book, but I have no clue where I put it. So you could just look at a picture of it. A Visit from the Goon Squad is a kind of like a composite novel. So it's short stories that do like kind of intertwine and interweave within themselves. And so it's about like the music industry, and you're following all different stories that like you'll have like reoccurring characters and stuff like that kind of just like envelop into the one thing. There's a PowerPoint presentation in it. That's all I gotta say. And it takes you on adventures too. At one point you're like on a safari in Africa. At another point you're just like doing like following a band around, like stuff like that. Definitely a recommendation. Next up is You Made a Fool of Death with Your Beauty by Akwaeke Emezi. This one follows our main character who lost her husband kind of recently, and it's like a romance, but more of like a literary romance where I feel like it subverts expectations of what should happen in a romance. Like, you'll know from the beginning who she's going to end up with or, like, whatever like that. And it has more to do with her and overcoming her trauma and overcoming the loss of someone that she loves and grieving, along with growing into being able to love someone new. And it is just so fucking good. And I cried, and I felt like the relationships were so good. Her best friend was amazing and would always say exactly what needed to be said. So next is Finley Donovan is Killing It by Elle Cosimano. This is a mystery, and it's like a lightly kind of cozy, no, not cozy, but like, I don't know, it's fun. It's like exciting. It's about this girl who this woman, and she is a writer, and she hasn't been able to really like come up with a story and is having a lot of issues. She just got divorced. She's a single mother, and she's having custody issues, and she's overheard her talking to her editor, and someone thinks that she's a hit person because she like writes mysteries and stuff. So the person's like, hey, like, I want to put a hit on my husband. And she's like, what? And everything goes crazy from there. It has some wonderful characters. I love her assistant. I love like the dynamics that happen. I like that there's like a romance in it, but it's not, does not at all take center stage, which is really nice. Like, I love a romance, but at the same time, when it becomes like the whole book, I'm like, I'm not reading a romance here, I'm reading a mystery, you know? So, very good. And funny. If you want a funny book, like, that is it. And I really want to read the rest of them. Next is Beneath the Sugar Sky by Seanan McGuire. I read the first 2 books, reread the first 2 books this year. You know, next year I'll probably reread the first 3 books so I can read the 4th one. Anyways. So this is more of like my saying that I love this series and that I want to move further in this series because it is just so good. It is just the right amount of magical. Maybe that's what I was saying House in the Cerulean Sea kind of reminded me of, but like a lighter version. Maybe, I don't know. Anyways, the Wayward Children series is, it's like darker than you think too, so it's more of like, it follows teenagers or kids, but it's like kind of like horrifying. And it either takes you to the wayward children, like where they're living to, I'm not explaining anything here. These children who went to magical lands and then come back. So kind of like a wizard, like Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. And they come back, but they're kind of like messed up because they were in these magical lands and they usually are like have a hard time letting go of that, and so they get sent to this place so that they can readjust and reacclimate to normal life, but some of them take place in magical lands that they have gone back to or something like that, and they're so good. Okay, last one is So Happy For You by Celia Laskey. And this one was such a surprising one as well, because I went into it not knowing what it was about, and I was expecting, like, I kept hearing, it's more about the friendship, it's like more of this, but it looks like a romance. This is not a romance. So this is in a world where the wedding industrial complex is like kind of the whole purpose of life. Like, everyone's obsessed with marriage and weddings and stuff like that. And there are these weird traditions that go along with weddings that are a little crazier than we have. And they're called charms, like wedding charms or something. And this follows this woman who is not like, does not care about weddings, thinks it is like weddings are problematic, marriages are problematic, like all this stuff. And her old best friend is getting married and invites her to be the maid of honor. And she's like, why would you choose me? Like, we're not really friends anymore. Like, we don't really hang out. We have different, like, politics and different ideas of the world. And it's a wild one. Because you just, like, I feel like it's one of those ones that feels like you're on a roller coaster with the characters. Love it. Honorable mentions. You by Caroline Kepnes. I loved it. It didn't make it onto the main list. I don't know why, but it was so much fun. I love reading from like this like bad person's perspective, like this horrible person's perspective where you're just like, what is wrong with you? And he's like, he's a stalker, and he's like, I'm helping her. I love her so much. You are the love of my love. And he just keeps going. And I love his like ideas as to like how what he's doing is a good thing, and he's like a murderer and stuff. But I read the second one too. Not as good as the first one. Maybe I'll read the third one. I know the fourth one's coming out soon. We see. Next honorable mention would be Bliss Montage by Ling. I really enjoyed this one. I haven't read a collection of short stories in a long time, and I think it was really entertaining because of that for me. I had a fun time like going through the different stories and just kind of like I think it's more of like a reawakening me reading this, that maybe I should read more short story collections, and reminding me that it's something I love. So I wanted to put that in this list just so you would know that I love that. I think that's all I have for you for my best books of 2022. Maybe I'll do like a ranking. I don't know. We see what I do. Who knows? Maybe I'll do statistics. Let me know if you want to see any of these things. Like, I could tier rank all the books I read this year. I could also do a stats thing. Like I just said that. Thank you for being here, and I hope you enjoyed it. Okay, bye.